So what I'd like to talk about today is this idea of cosmogenesis and relating it to Dogen, in particular, his teachings found in the fascicle Uji. So we're going to look at this Dogen's fascicle Uji together. And my thought here is that I could probably make 2 or maybe 3 Dharma talks out of this particular fascicle. And in this one, I'll attempt to relate it to this idea of cosmogenesis. So in doing that, I'd like to offer 3 different aspects to the talk. The first one is to think about, or to bring up the question of what is our context? What is our context? The second part is to speak directly about Uji and what we call cosmogenesis, or an expanding universe. And the third part is to offer some points on discussion. All right. So with regards to the first part, our context, shikantaza. Shikantaza means just sitting or meditation. And you'll often hear teachers say, just sit. Right? Well, that's what just sitting, just sit. But what are we just sitting in? We're sitting in a particular context. And shikantaza fits into the Eightfold Path of the Buddha very neatly within the last 4 limbs of right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right insight, those last 4 pieces of the Eightfold Path. But there's another piece of the Eightfold Path that we often don't maybe consider when we think just sit, and that is right view. What's the world view that we're sitting in? And this worldview that we're sitting in makes all the difference for our experience in just sitting. It will inform our just sitting. So the question I want to bring up is, which worldview are we actually living in when we're sitting, when we're doing zazen, when we're doing shikantaza? All right, and to give us some hints as to the probable worldview that we're living in, is most of us live in a worldview that splits up matter and spirit. Right? Matter is one thing, it's a physical. Spirit is another. And usually these are considered 2 different realms. Science takes care of the matter part. Religion takes care of the spirit part. We live in a world that splits up body and mind. Body is here and mind is something that goes on in this particular part of the body. It's elevated above the body. It's the highest point of the body, this mind. And we live in a world that splits those 2 things up. We pay particular closer attention to the mind than we do to the body. We feel it's more important. Maybe you don't, but for the most part, that's how most people live in our world, is doing that, including myself. Right? We see the world as a machine to be used for our benefit. What's used? The plants, the animals, and the minerals are all used to our own end, and there appears to be no end to our consumption. We feel entitled to do what we wish to the planet. We see a sacred space is defined by a set of 4 walls, right? As opposed to a sacred space being a natural formation, as opposed to a sacred space being, say, the Missouri River, right? Or some natural form. But this is a particular view in the modern, you can call it the industrial mindset, a mindset that sees things in terms of mechanism and usage. This is not the view that Dogen had in his time, nor is it the view of modern science. While Dogen's view and modern science are not exactly the same, they're very, very compatible. And while Dogen didn't know about evolution like we do today, that species actually evolve, or about cosmogenesis, this idea that the universe is constantly transforming, is constantly being birthed anew in every moment, even now that we come from stars, he did understand change, and he believed we were all destined for Buddhahood. Dogen saw the universe, all things in it, moving towards complete, perfect enlightenment. In fact, the universe itself was already preaching the Dharma. The universe itself is the context for the Buddha. Cosmogenesis, this idea of a continually creating cosmos, can help us to update Dogen's understanding for modern times. And Dogen's understanding can help us have confidence in the Dharma as adaptable to our times as well, to the modern scientific way of thinking. So cosmogenesis is what we are in, according to our modern, most up-to-date way of perceiving the universe, our most up-to-date view of the world. Another way to say this is that what the data is showing us is that the universe, as we understand it, is not a place, but is itself an unfolding story. All right, that just try to get your mind wrapped around. The universe itself is not a place, it's not a location, but an unfolding story. How might this idea of seeing the universe as a story impact our Zazen? Are we doing shikantaza in a cosmos, or are we sitting in a cosmogenesis? Those are two different worldviews. It's not just another thought. A worldview is not the same thing as thought. From the Eightfold Path, we have right view is the first one, and then right thought springs out of right view. All right, so cosmogenesis is about right view. It's not about thought. It's not about thinking, oh, that's just one more thought. No, our view of the world affects our thoughts. Okay, now let's look at Uji, this fascicle from Dogen's Shobogenzo. And I want to just shout out to Shinkyu. I've known about Uji for some time, but Shinkyu and I were talking the last time I was there about the compatibility of this with cosmogenesis. And so I just want to shout out to Shinkyu to thank him for pointing out particular verses that I want to share today, because I think they can help us here. So, Uji, don't you just, Uji. U means being, and Ji, time. Uji is inseparable, and right from the title says everything. Being and time are inseparable. Dogen is just going to repeat that message throughout. And this has huge ramifications for how we view the world. Because usually we see being and time as separate things. Right? Clock time is one thing and being is another. But Dogen is pointing to the merging or the absolute inseparability of being and time. He says, for the time being here means time itself is being, and all being is time. There is no time without being. Right? There is no time separate from being. Perhaps we could use the word becoming to describe Uji. Right? But it's hard for us to see this because we've played so much stock in clock time. But Dogen, he didn't live in our world. He saw time in nature, in light and darkness, as well as in life and death. Perhaps not too much like our own ancestors. Okay, next line. I'm not going into each one of these lines, but picking out specific ones that I think are pertinent for us. Because the signs of time's coming and going are obvious, people do not doubt it. In other words, we know time exists. We can see we can see how we change from one year to the next, how our face changes, we age, and etc. We can notice the change in the light and darkness throughout the day and in the seasons throughout the year, right? And if we bring this down to evolutionary time, we're invited, right? Modern science invites us to also include a sense of evolutionary time into our knowing of time. What does that look like? What might that feel like? What might that be to sit with? Right? Okay, he says, although they do not know, although they do not doubt it, although we do not doubt the signs of time's coming and going, we do not understand it. Although we do not doubt it, we don't understand it. And I would say, because we don't doubt it, we're never going to understand it. We need to doubt. We need to bring doubt to focus in on our incessant understanding of time as separate from being. To doubt that. What would happen in our sitting practice if we began to doubt our conceptions of time? Right? Now, a lot of times we're thinking, I can sit for 30 minutes. That's not a good way of sitting. That's not a good worldview to come to sitting with, because we're thinking about time as separate from being. These two different, we've got to concentrate our minds that merges time and being. And my teacher would say, listen to your body. Your body knows what time it is. That's another way. I think that's a beautiful way. I think she said it beautifully. It's a beautiful way of thinking about your body knows what time it is. Listen to your body, right? But we do not, and the other thing he says is, we do not understand time. This is huge. We don't understand time. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Actually, when we begin to doubt this time, this separate time, then our minds will enter incomprehensibility. We'll enter really a deep sense of mystery, or what we call don't know mind, not knowing, to not understand. This is important. This focusing in on not understanding. All right? If we understand it, then what's the point? It's that we can't comprehend being time. We can't comprehend it. That's the beauty. That's the beauty. All right? We don't want to get rid of that. We don't want to try to understand. Well, we want to enter into not understanding because we're already at understanding. We want to enter into not understanding because we're already at understanding, or we think we understand. Right? This is where doubt comes in. To not understand is to live in awe. Right? To not understand is to live in awe. Right? It's an invitation. It's an invitation. Dogen, I love this. The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. See each thing in this entire world as a moment of time. Boom. Wow. Can you observe the world moving or arraying itself? Listen to this. 100 years ago, this year in 1924, Edwin Hubble, scientist here in the United States, he He was looking through the most powerful telescope of his day to determine whether the Milky Way galaxy was the only galaxy in the universe or not. What he learned was astounding. He found out that not only is there trillions of galaxies besides the Milky Way, get your mind wrapped around that. In each galaxy, trillions of stars, trillions of galaxies. But what else he found? These galaxies are all moving apart from each other through time. If you calculate through time where they're going, they're moving apart from each other. And he deduced that if they're moving apart, they must have had a place where they completely coalesced at one point. Right? Boom. That's what we call the Big Bang. Right? If we take those galaxies, draw them back through time, they're all coming closer and closer together. They break up, right? Then we got the hydrogen atoms, and they're all coming together into one single point. This is an astonishing discovery, right? We can't see it. Well, we can and can't see this, because what was also discovered later in the 1960s was the background radiation of the Big Bang, that is still present. And this is this idea of cosmogenesis, that the universe is constant. It's in motion, which is very different from the way that our ancestors, let alone our parents, saw the universe, right? When they woke up in the morning, everything was still. The sun comes up, right? That our language betrays the way that we see the world. The sun comes up. Rather, what we're seeing is not only is the earth moving around the sun, that's old news, right? That's old news. But we're seeing now that the sun moves, the stars are moving, and the galaxies themselves are moving through space. Astonishing to think about this. All right. Now, Dogen, things do not hinder one another, just as moments do not hinder one another. Thus, I love this, thus the self, setting itself out in array, sees itself. Right? One way that Thomas Berry says this is that the universe is coming to know itself through the self-reflection of the human. Or another way he says it is, the human is the self-reflective aspect of the universe. All right? Just get your mind wrapped around that stuff. Dogen, know that in this way there are myriads of forms and hundreds of grasses throughout the entire earth. It's another way of talking about the whole universe. There are myriads of forms and hundreds of grasses throughout the entire earth, and yet each grass and each form itself is the entire earth. Whoa! Right? The blade of grass he's talking about is ourself, right? He's saying the self is the entire earth. Now get this line. He says, the study of this is the beginning of practice. That's the beginning. That's when we sit down and do Zazen. That's the beginning of practice, to know that you are the whole universe in the form of a human being. That you are that aspect of the universe that is able to reflect on itself. You are the universe reflecting on itself. Let's put it that way. Right? This is the beginning. All right. So I want to offer a couple of questions for discussion to think about, to consider here. In light of cosmogenesis, the universe is not static as we once thought. The stars are not fixed. They have not been around forever. The universe is not a place, but an ever unfolding story. How does this idea of the universe as a story impact our sense of self and our place within the larger cosmic narrative? right? Let's just take a moment to think about that and to study it and discuss it. Right? Let me repeat it. In light of cosmogenesis, the universe is not static as we once thought. The stars are not fixed. They have not been around forever. The universe is not a place, but an ever unfolding story. How does the idea of the universe as a story impact our sense of self and our place within the larger cosmic narrative? Right?
Brian?
Yeah.
So the old saying, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and how all the matter that we are existed before it formed this moment. And at some point in time, it'll go back to being some high entropy, right? It's going to be, or low entropy. It's going to be highly disrupted. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on how then can we think about that? Because right now, I'm just very much aware and thinking about I'm this fully formed, thinking, conscious person, but yet eons ago, all those atoms were elsewhere, and eons from now they're going to be elsewhere. So the story that we live in, how then can we best, this moment being present right now, how do we balance that against this story that we're in?
Right, yeah. How do we do that? I think that's our koan. That's the real Genjo koan right there. Right, like, wow, what you just said. I mean, but I think what Zazen can help us do is really get us inside of those atoms. Right? We're not, what we do is we tend to extrapolate ourselves out from the story and look inside as if we're somehow out here looking in. And what Zazen can help us with through concentration is to bring that two together. Subject and object are not two separate things. So what we are, we're hydrogen atoms talking to each other. Right? We're hydrogen waking up to itself.
Thank you.
Yeah. I really encourage people to explore this. I mean, that's just my response to your question, but I think this is a koan. It's a real modern koan for us. How do we live with this?
Yeah. I've been thinking, I think I've been kind of challenged by this practice in the East of venerating ancestors, right? So it's really got me asking, who are my ancestors?
Mm.
Looking into, so largely Celtic ancestry and looking into that mythology and sort of asking myself, what was it about that, the life that they were living, that made that mythology meaningful and made that sort of the way they connected to the realm of spirit. And obviously a lot of that was stamped out by the Romans and Christianity, and even that there's why was it that they believed what they did in that time, in that context. And it's kind of brought me to a sort of humility, because I think when I came to Zen, I came the way that many people did, was from a scientific, like a physical materialist view of the world. And like, don't get me wrong, I love science, I love it. But also I think there's a sort of, it's given me a sense of humility, I think, to like view the mythology of my own ancestors or another culture to like hold that and to see why that's important, and ultimately to we're looking, what is my own mythology? You know, what is it that gives my life meaning in this time, and still on that journey, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. There's, so this particular way of talking about it, kind of the modern scientific understanding, is not to exclude other views such as Celtic spirituality. There's multiple ways of knowing, and we want to embrace all of them, right? We should. I mean, the universe, part of what we're learning about the university is its multiplicity. And that means multiple views. We don't want to dismiss any of these views. We want to embrace them all. And there may be other ways of talking about this that are more powerful to you, and that is totally fine. I would encourage that to continue.
I suppose I have a question too, like thinking specifically about Buddhism, and particularly like Mahayana Buddhism. Like the Buddha came up with a cosmology that was Brahma created, this realm. It's born, it grows, and it dies, and that's happened multiple times. And not only this universe, but there are many universes. And when I think about, so we have Buddha realms, right? I'm not sure that a Buddha realm has to do with the origin of the universe. I feel like Buddhism and Buddhist mythology is largely silent on the origin of the universe. Is that correct?
Right, yes. Yes and no. The Buddhist concept of dependent co-origination, it's not a mythology, but it is a way of understanding how everything is interconnected. You can't pull one thing out of the universe without affecting everything else. So there is that concept, and I think that's one of the reasons why Buddhism is uniquely positioned in modern times, is because we're somewhat in between stories. We're in between mythologies. So to see that the universe itself is its own story, that's hard to get our minds wrapped around, because we don't know the end. We have some ideas. We have some ideas about how it's begun, how we are now, and some ideas about where it's going, but we don't know how it will all come about, how it's going to end. At Uchiyama Kosho Roshi says that when we're born, the usual way of thinking of our birth is that we're born and we pop up on a stage that's already existing. And that stage is life or the universe or the world. But he says the Zen understanding, and this is from Huayan or the Abhitamsaka Sutra, says that when one person is born, the entire universe is born. And when one person dies, the entire universe dies. Right? That's like Dogen says, in one blade of grass is the entire earth. Each of us is the entire universe. So this kind of idea, it's not necessarily a mythology. I mean, we could go into, and there are stories about the Buddha's previous lives, etc. So there is mythology within Buddhism. But to answer your question specifically about an origin of the universe, in the Abhitamsaka Sutra, there's a chapter that's dedicated to the origin of the universe, and you start to read it, and you get down a few paragraphs, and it finally says it's incomprehensible. So it doesn't give us an answer to that, and that might be okay. That's, in my view, it's okay. But again, I do want to affirm that that's not to say that other mythologies are wrong. And I don't think we need to go there. We don't need to choose one or the other. But there's multiple facets to reality, and other cultures can give us hints of that as well. And maybe we go deeper into other mythologies, and that is totally legit. Yeah. Hey,
Hi,
Max.
Daishin. Um, and I had the thought while you were talking about how much of our time is commodified. How most of us are selling, half our waking hours in order to pay the bills, and that is one a fairly recent arrangement, and the particular way that we do that is shaped by past social struggles like the 40-hour work week, the weekend, that sort of thing, was created by uh, decades of pressure leading up to the New Deal, different actions. um, and as when you asked, how does the sense of the universe as an unfolding story shape a sense of our place in it, it almost feels to me like, reading a book of poetry and then you get to this point and there's just some spreadsheets crammed in there tracking every 15 minutes of how we use our time. It's like jarring in that way. So I'm wondering, one, how you think that this social arrangement of how we use our time impacts, our ability or tendency to approach Zen practice and this concept of uji, of being time, and secondly, the inverse, how cultivating that sense of time as being can impact the way that we approach the more commodified parts of our lives.
Great question. Yeah, Max, those are great questions. I, I think that's what I was getting at when I was talking about we don't doubt. We even though we know time comes and goes, Dogen says we don't doubt it. And I think he's asking us to doubt it. And to see where that goes, see where that leads. Because we're all, like you said, we're all in this kind of a system that's tied to clock time. And we know that clock time drives us crazy. We didn't, our ancestors' minds weren't shaped by clock time. Clocks have only been around for what, a few hundred years? And think about all of the centuries that preceded clocks. We were more focused on what Dogen talks about being time just naturally. So I think I don't have the answers to these questions, but maybe we can explore them together and see how, when we start to think about time, when we start to doubt time in our everyday life, that's going to lead to different options. That potentially leads to different options and choices that we can make with how we use our energies. We might not be aware of how many options we have before us when we're so tied into a clock, right? So breaking out of that fixed mindset of this separation of time and being, breaking out of that kind of a prison, I mean, we're all in it. We can't completely let go of it. We have to function in our society. At the same time, we can use this uji to help us navigate to seeing a new world, to see a different world, not a new world, but because this understanding has been around, well, empirically just 100 years, but Dogen had a sense of it 1,000 years ago. And so it starts with right view. how do we understand the world and our place in it? Do we see ourselves as in a mechanistic clockwork universe, which is what we usually do? Or when we sit, we can bring in this idea of cosmogenesis. It starts with right view. We're not going to be able to change individually, we're not going to be able to change the whole system of the way that works. But we can begin to change our perception, our view of the world, how we see ourselves in it. This idea that, when we're sitting, we're not sitting in a still universe that's been around forever. We're sitting in an ever creating cosmos, a cosmos that's continually regenerating even in this moment. My teacher would say, the Big Bang is happening right now. Creation is happening right this second. And we can work with creation. We're agents in that creation. So again, it starts with right perception. We got to still do our job. But we don't know what, bringing this worldview into our life can help us see other possibilities. That's just where I'm going with this. What that looks like concretely is going to be different for each of us.
Kind of with that, I feel very aware of the fact that like I'm fairly busy and I have a lot of different priorities that I do care about like doing in a day. So it does feel like I do kind of divide my day up into like kind of increments of, like I need to exercise and I need to meditate and I want to do like writing and homework. And I do feel like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out because I think those things are important for me to do, and I do need to be intentional about, I guess maybe even like the phrasing of like how you spend your time is like telling that we're thinking of it as a commodity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hear you. Time management is so super important, and learning how to manage my own time was very important in my, in training in a temple. I practiced with a teacher that, in some ways, this like not being aware of clock time can create a lot of extra stress too. And I noticed how sometimes my teacher was when she could really enter into the moment and completely forget about time. And that's not good either, because then we do need time to do different things. So again, it's not about, I think the changes that are coming and that will continue to come is through change in how we see ourselves. So we still go through our time. We have our work week. We have to split up our days to do certain things, take care of our body, eat, etc. At the same time, how do we view what we're experiencing? That's what Zen is all about. It's getting that right view. When my teacher would say, get the big picture. Where's our place in this? Can we see ourselves as coming from a long lineage of ancestors that includes not just our spiritual ancestors, not just our blood ancestors, but our animal ancestors, our fish ancestors, our plant ancestors, our atomic ancestors, all of them are participating in each moment. And we don't always remember that, but this is an invitation to begin to remember, to open up to that particular view, and whatever it is, whatever activity that you're doing, to inspire a sense of, wow, what happened? What's been happening the past 14 billion years? I'm just waking up to this now. Like people are just starting to wake up to this, and bring that into your life. The awe, having a sense of awe itself will guide us to where we need to be. Right? Having a sense of the awesomeness of our life, the awesomeness of life will itself guide us. Yeah.
Just a comment, Daishin. I appreciate your emphasis on doubt, because it got me thinking that, some of the most profound moments that I remember in my own life are moments when suddenly you look at something familiar and it seems incomprehensible to you. So
Yeah.
looking at something and all of a sudden you think, you know, there's not even a question that really formulates it. It's basically how on earth did the universe create this? Or
Yeah.
where did this come from? You know, but it's not like planned. It's like suddenly you look at things and it seems incomprehensible, and then you know, maybe what you were just saying is what that is. It's seeing that in the light of the whole universe.
Yeah, 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 and you know, real transitional moments like births, weddings, and funerals really wake us up to this aspect of life. And you know, right now we're witnessing death on a major scale. And if we allow that to kind of that witnessing can begin to wake us up to this, I think, more deeply too. That's one of the gifts of it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Whitney.
Hi. So I wanted to kind of comment on how we were talking about right view reminds me of a beginner's mind a lot. Beginner's mind is kind of like that, like limitless curiosity. You know, like kind of like not understanding something is to live in awe, like what you said. And I don't think that we approach time with really a beginner's mind because we understand it, but we don't doubt it. And I think that doubt is a helpful thing because it helps us relate our context, the context of things that are outside of us, or maybe even like impermanent, because, you know, even like clocks are impermanent, or human language will be impermanent. So I guess that if this is a story unfolding, and like you said, Dasheen, like we are the universe reflecting on itself, you know, change yourself, then you change the world. Approaching things with that beginner's mind, then like, you know, if we are like the universe in a blade of grass or the ocean in a drop, then kind of like join in and do what you want, I guess.
Well, yeah, Whitney, I love what you said about the beginner's mind. That's exactly it. I think we undervalue yeah, beginner's mind is absolutely key. And so we can practice when we wake up in the morning. You know, so when I'm in that kind of non-beginner's mind when I wake up, I think about what day is it? You know, is it Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? You know, and the days of the week orient me. And that's okay because I need to know, okay, what I'm going to be doing and then schedule it out. But actually, when we wake up in the morning, we can also, at the same time, or maybe right after, we can say, there's no such thing as Monday, right? Monday doesn't exist. This is a brand new day. This day has never come about before. It's an unrepeatable event. We're not repeating ourselves, right? We're not. When we get into this idea that of repetition, we think, oh, I'm going to do this again. Here I am again. I'm doing the same thing again. That's impossible when we think about cosmogenesis. The universe is creating itself moment after moment, completely different day, completely new us. And yeah, let's enter that with awe, with curiosity, with beginner's mind. This takes effort though. This takes effort. And yeah, that's why we get together as Sangha, right? We need the inspiration from each other. I need you guys to help me. You guys get me psyched up, and I hope to do the same for you. We got to do it for each other.
I'd like to chime in. Can you hear
Yeah.
me okay?
Chris, yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of time, I just want to keep people within a time frame. So yeah, let's make this our last question, if you will. And then if there's others that you want to contact, if you want to talk about this after, or feel free to contact me as well if you'd like, and I'm happy to discuss it more. But I just want to respect everybody's time.
So I've been sitting and listening to you and everyone else talk, and it kind of reminded me after listening in this subject that in my own life, a lot of it I think comes down to age and perspective. I'm kind of at the top of the hill, starting to, I kind of see life as like a mountain. When you're young, you're climbing up it, and you think that you're going to achieve something, and you're looking to get something out of it, and then you get at the top, and you realize that, oh, I'm going to come back down, and I'm going to die, and that whole journey is going to be very temporal. You kind of start to realize, at least for me, that none of this is really that important. I mean, my life, I like what's helped me the most. And you mentioned myth. It's kind of like the Hindu idea of life as a play, and then we play a part. And it's, we come into this world. We have very limited time to do what we do, and I just don't think that I'm to the point in my life now to where I'm trying to just relax and not to take all this very seriously, because it is so quick. It doesn't seem that way when you're younger because you don't have the advantage of perspective, but as you get older, you do, and especially if you're introspective. And so for me, like when I go to my job, everybody at my job thinks that what we do is so important. It's not. On the grand scale of things, I laugh internally. I see these people get stressed out about, oh, we have to do this and this has to be done by a certain time, hence your subject. And I play the game because I got to have a roof overhead. I got to be able to put fuel in my car and food in my belly. But I don't take it that seriously from like the ultimate view, because I just realized that what we're doing just really it has no impact on the universe at large, as far as I'm concerned. And so that's just kind of helped me to kind of relax with it and just kind of go with it. And then to your point you mentioned earlier about understanding, I don't think we ever will know. I don't ever think we will understand. I don't think it's possible. We're still going to try, and we're still going to make all this effort, and maybe that's what we need to do. But I've given up on trying to, because I don't, if I had an answer, that would be some kind of sense of completion, and I don't really see life as like that. It's more of a game or a play. I play my part, I exit, and then what happens next, I have no idea what that's going to be, but I'm not going to worry about it or stress over it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris.